The humans never saw it coming. Captain Stephen Jones stared out the viewport of his crippled ship, watching helplessly as the alien fleet towed his battered vessels towards their capital world. The sleek, angular warships of the Deltan Empire dwarfed the human fleet, their advanced weaponry having effortlessly crushed any resistance. Jones and his crew had ventured into uncharted space, seeking new frontiers and allies, but instead they found themselves at the mercy of a ruthless galactic power. The Deltans, ruled by the iron-fisted Empress Azara, viewed the primitive humans with disdain and suspicion. Jones had tried to open communications, to seek peace and understanding, but the Deltans had responded with overwhelming force. As the human ships approached Thalassar Prime, the heart of the Deltan Empire, Jones braced himself for the worst. He knew that he and his crew would face brutal interrogation and imprisonment. The Deltans were intrigued by the humans' audacity to explore deep space without the Empire's authorization. Empress Azara feared that the human incursion could ignite a rebellion among the oppressed races under her rule. Back on Earth, news of the disastrous first contact sent shockwaves through the halls of power. Human leaders scrambled to respond to the revelation of a vast alien empire capable of utterly overwhelming their fledgling space fleet. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and humanity's very survival hung in the balance. Politicians and military leaders clashed over how to confront this unprecedented crisis, some advocating for retaliation, others urging caution. Amidst the chaos, a desperate plan took shape. Earth would send a covert team of operatives to infiltrate Deltan society and gather vital intelligence. It was a daring gambit, a last-ditch effort to give humanity a fighting chance against the mighty Deltan Empire. But with Captain Jones and his crew held captive on an alien world, the success of this mission was far from certain. The future of the human race rested on the shoulders of a brave few, embarking on a journey into the heart of an unforgiving galaxy. In the halls of power on Earth, the revelation of the Deltan Empire's existence sparked fierce debates and soul-searching. The United Nations convened an emergency summit, bringing together the world's leaders to confront this unprecedented crisis. In the Grand Assembly Hall, the cacophony of raised voices and heated arguments gave way to a somber silence as the full implications of the situation sank in. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and every decision carried the weight of billions of lives. After hours of intense deliberation, a consensus emerged. Diplomacy, not war, was the only path forward. To meet the might of the Deltan Empire with violence would be to court annihilation. Earth needed an emissary, a voice to speak for all humankind in the face of this existential threat. The choice was clear. Alexander Novak, a veteran diplomat with a razor-sharp intellect and an unwavering moral compass. Novak accepted the burden of this momentous task with a solemn nod. He knew that the future of humanity rested on his shoulders. With a hand-picked team of diplomats and a small, fast ship equipped with the latest stealth technology, Novak set out on a perilous journey to the heart of the Deltan Empire. As the human ship slipped through the inky void of space, Captain Stephen Jones and his crew languished in the bowels of a Deltan detention center. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and despair, the walls reverberating with the echoes of anguished cries. Jones himself bore the marks of brutal interrogation, his face a map of bruises and cuts. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope emerged in the form of Pollux, the young Deltan diplomat tasked with questioning the human captives. Through long hours of conversation, Pollux found himself drawn to the tales of a society where all individuals, regardless of status or origin, enjoyed fundamental rights and freedoms. The seeds of doubt took root in his mind, and he began to question the very foundations of the empire he served. On Thalassar Prime, Ambassador Novak and his team made their way through the bustling streets of the capital city. The alien metropolis was a dizzying spectacle of towering spires and sprawling slums, a study in contrast that spoke to the deep inequalities of Deltan society. Novak's keen eyes drank in every detail, his mind whirring with the complexities of the task before him. At the Imperial Palace, a grand edifice of gleaming metal and polished stone, Novak was granted an audience with Empress Azara herself. The throne room was a cavernous space, every surface adorned with the trappings of wealth and power. The Empress reclined on an elevated dais, forcing her supplicants to crane their necks upward in submission. Novak stood tall before the Empress, his voice calm and measured as he delivered Earth's offer of peaceful coexistence. But Azara was unmoved, her eyes flashing with disdain as she demanded nothing less than total submission. The Empire, she declared, would brook no challenge to its supremacy. The audience ended in a tense stalemate, with Novak refusing to bend to Azara's demands. As he departed the palace, the ambassador's mind raced with the implications of the Empress's intransigence. The road ahead would be perilous, the odds stacked against them. But Novak knew that he would not, fail. The fate of two civilizations depended on it. As Novak navigated the labyrinthine streets of Thalassar Prime, he found himself drawn into the orbit of the Deltan resistance. Zephyr, a firebrand poet with a voice that could stir the hearts of millions, opened his eyes to the suffering and oppression of the Empire's subjugated masses. In the squalid tenements and back alleys of the city, Novak witnessed firsthand the brutality of Azara's rule. A bond began to form between the human diplomat and the Deltan revolutionary, a connection born of shared purpose and the stirrings of something deeper. Despite the gulf of culture and species that separated them, Novak and Zephyr found themselves drawn together by the heat of their convictions. Meanwhile, in the depths of the detention center, Pollux made a fateful decision. Unable to countenance the torture of the human prisoners, he dedication to help Jones and his crew escape. With the aid of a handful of Deltan rebels, Pollux infiltrated the complex in a daring nighttime raid. Jones and his men emerged into the smoggy night air of Thalassar Prime, their lungs heaving with the sweet taste of freedom. But their trials were nowhere near the end. The Empress's security forces were hot on their heels, and time was running out. Guided by Pollux's insider knowledge, Jones and his crew linked up with Novak and the Deltan resistance. In a hidden safe house deep in the slums, an unlikely alliance began to take shape. Humans and Deltans, diplomats and rebels, all united by a common cause, to overthrow the Empress and bring freedom to the oppressed masses of the Empire. The challenges ahead loomed large, the risks staggering. But for Novak, Jones, Zephyr, and Pollux, the stakes were too high to back down. Together they would change the course of history, or die trying. The fate of Earth and the Deltan Empire rested on their shoulders as they embarked on a desperate gamble to strike at the very heart of Azara's regime. In the shadowy corners of Thalassar Prime, Ambassador Alexander Novak and Zephyr, the Deltan revolutionary, set their plans in motion. They huddled in cramped basements and abandoned warehouses, their voices low as they strategized with the rebel leadership. "We need to reach the masses," Zephyr said, her eyes gleaming with fierce dedication. "Show them the truth about Azara's regime." Novak nodded, pulling out a small device. "Earth's technology can help. These holoprojectors can broadcast our message across the city." As the rebels worked tirelessly to spread their message, Novak sent an encrypted transmission to Earth. Admiral Vincent Blackwell received it in his dimly lit office, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of the holographic display. The message's contents caused great concern on Blackwell. He paced his office, torn between non-intervention and the urge to act. After hours of contemplation, he made his decision. "Prepare a covert team," he ordered his aide. "We're sending support to Thalassar Prime." On the alien world, Pollux navigated the treacherous waters of the imperial court. He stood before Empress Azara, his face a mask of loyalty, while his heart raced with the weight of his deception. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "I've uncovered disturbing reports of rebel activity in the outer districts." Azara's eyes narrowed. "Crush them," she hissed. "Show no mercy." Pollux bowed again, already planning how to relay this information to the rebels. In the streets of Thalassar Prime, the rebellion ignited. Crowds gathered in plazas, listening to Zephyr's impassioned words broadcast from hidden projectors. Imperial troops moved to disperse them, but found themselves outmatched by rebels wielding strange, powerful weapons. Colonel Elena Ivanova, posing as a human diplomat, oversaw the distribution of Earth's advanced technology to the rebel forces. She watched with cold satisfaction as Deltan fighters donned adaptive camouflage suits and took up energy rifles. "Remember," she instructed, "hit fast and disappear. Don't give them a chance to regroup." The rebellion's momentum grew with each passing day. Imperial supply depots erupted in flames. Communication towers toppled. Military bases fell to lightning-fast guerrilla attacks. In her palace, Empress Azara raged. "Find them!" she screamed at her cowering advisors. "Burn every district if you have to." The once pristine capital devolved into a war zone. The scent of smoke and ozone filled the air as Imperial forces clashed with rebels in the streets. Civilians caught in the crossfire fled for shelter, their lives forever changed by the conflict engulfing their world. Zephyr narrowly escaped death when a plasma bolt seared past her head, reducing a nearby wall to slag. She stumbled through back alleys, clutching her wounded arm, until she reached the human embassy. Novak rushed to her side, his heart pounding. "Zephyr, are you all right?" Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the unspoken feelings between them came rushing to the surface. Zephyr pulled Novak close, their lips meeting in a desperate, passionate kiss. But their moment of respite was short-lived. The sky above Thalassar Prime lit up with the fires of orbital bombardment. Admiral Drakos, at Azara's command, had begun raining destruction upon rebel-held areas from his ships in orbit. On Earth, heated debates raged in the halls of power. Admiral Blackwell stood before the United Nations Security Council, his voice steady as he made his case. "We cannot stand idly by," he argued. "If we don't act now, everything we've worked for will be lost." The vote was close, but in the end, Blackwell's plan was approved. Earth's fleet, a force of sleek, advanced warships, prepared to jump into Deltan space. In orbit around Thalassar Prime, Admiral Drakos stood on the bridge of his flagship, overseeing the bombardment of the planet below. Suddenly, alarms blared. "Multiple contacts," his sensor officer shouted. "Unknown vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel." Drakos turned, his eyes widening as the human fleet materialized before him. For a moment, silence reigned on the bridge. Then the sky erupted in fire as the two fleets clashed, the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. The void above Thalassar Prime erupted in a dazzling display of destruction as the human and Imperial fleets clashed. Admiral Blackwell's ships unleashed a devastating barrage, their railgun slugs and plasma torpedoes overwhelming the energy shields of the Deltan vessels. The Imperial flagship shuddered under the impact of human missiles, its hull breached in multiple sections. Admiral Drakos stumbled as his ship rocked from another hit, his face contorted with rage as he barked orders to his crew. "Launch all bombers! Flatten those rebel strongholds!" On the planet's surface, Zephyr sprinted through debris-strewn streets as Imperial bombers screamed overhead. The ground shook with each impact, buildings crumbling around her. She dove into a makeshift bunker, just as another explosion sent shockwaves through the air. In orbit, the tide of battle began to turn. Despite their initial success, the human ships found themselves outgunned and outnumbered. One by one, Earth's vessels succumbed to concentrated Deltan firepower, their armored hulls buckling under the onslaught. Colonel Ivanova's voice crackled over the comm as she led a squadron of advanced human fighters in a daring counterattack. "Blackbird Squadron, form up on me. We're punching through their—" Her transmission cut off abruptly as a Deltan energy beam sliced through her fighter. The burning wreckage plummeted towards the planet's surface, disappearing into the slums below. Admiral Blackwell's face was grim as he surveyed the tactical hologram. "Prepare for emergency jump. We need to regroup and—" He was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Pollux. The Deltan defector's voice was strained as he relayed critical intelligence. "Admiral, they're preparing to deploy the planet cracker cannon. If it fires, your fleet and Earth itself will be obliterated." Novak's mind raced as he processed this information. He turned to Pollux, his eyes intense. "Can you disable it?" Pollux nodded, his fingers flying over a datapad. "I have access codes. I can disrupt the targeting systems, but only temporarily." Blackwell's voice rang out over the fleet-wide channel. "All ships converge on these coordinates. Concentrate all fire on the Planet Cracker cannon. Drone fighters, run interference. The space above Thalassar Prime became a maelstrom of energy beams, missiles, and debris as the human fleet made its desperate push. On the cannon's control deck, Deltan technicians worked feverishly to counteract Pollux' sabotage. A junior officer approached Admiral Dracos, his voice trembling. "Sir, we've lost targeting control. The cannon, it won't fire." Dracos' eyes widened in horror as he watched the approaching human ships. "No!" The Planet Cracker cannon erupted in a series of explosions as human weapons found their mark. The massive structure broke apart, pieces of it raining down on the planet below. On the surface, Ivanova limped through the wreckage of her crash fighter. The slums around her were a war zone, filled with the sounds of combat and the cries of the wounded. She stumbled upon a group of armed civilians, led by one of Zephyr's lieutenants. "Colonel," the rebel called out, "over here!" Ivanova joined them, quickly assessing the situation. "What's the status of the uprising?" The rebel grinned fiercely. "It's spreading like wildfire. Imperial forces are being overwhelmed across multiple districts." In her opulent palace, Empress Azara watched in disbelief as her capital descended into chaos. Alarms blared throughout the structure as fires raged in the distance. "Prepare my shuttle," she commanded, her voice cold with fury. "This world is lost." As Azara's shuttle lifted off, Admiral Dracos received the news of her flight with a mixture of anger and desperation. He opened a channel to the human fleet. "Admiral Blackwell," he said, his voice heavy with defeat, "the Empress is fleeing. Her shuttle's heading your way." Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. "All fighters, new orders. Intercept and neutralize the Empress's shuttle." Human fighters streaked through the atmosphere, closing in on Azara's escaping vessel. A volley of missiles struck true, sending the Imperial shuttle plummeting back towards the burning capital. As the Empress's craft disappeared into the inferno below, the Imperial fleet's resistance crumbled. On the surface, masses of newly liberated Deltans poured into the streets, their cheers drowning out the fading sounds of battle. Novak found Zephyr amid the celebrations, pulling her into a fierce embrace. As they looked out over the smoldering cityscape, the magnitude of what they had accomplished began to sink in. But even as the immediate threat receded, both knew that the real work of reshaping the Deltan Empire had only just begun. Zephyr's eyes narrowed as she watched the Empress's shuttle plummet through Thalassar Prime's atmosphere, trailing fire and debris. The rebel command center erupted in cheers, but she remained silent, her grip tightening on Novak's hand. "It's not over," she said, her voice barely audible above the din. "Azara's death will only fuel the Imperial loyalists' rage." Novak opened his mouth to respond, but alarms blared throughout the facility. A rebel technician's face paled as he studied his console. "Multiple orbital signatures detected. The Imperial fleet is repositioning." On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Draco stood rigid, his face a mask of cold fury. "The Empress is dead," he announced to his officers. "We are all that remains of the true empire. Prepare for full orbital bombardment of the capital." The sky above Thalassar Prime lit up with searing lances of energy as Dracos' ships rained destruction upon the city. Buildings crumbled, streets buckled, and the air filled with screams and the acrid stench of burning metal. Admiral Blackwell's voice crackled over the comm, strained and urgent. "All ships prepare for emergency jump. We can't hold this position." Zephyr watched in horror as the human fleet vanished in a series of brilliant flashes, leaving Thalassar Prime to its fate. She turned to Novak, her eyes blazing. "We need options, now!" Pollux burst into the command center, his uniform singed and torn. "I may have something," he said, pulling up schematics on the main display. "There's a hidden depot of ancient warheads, planet killers. If we can secure them before Dracos..." Novak nodded grimly. "It's our only play, Colonel Ivanova." The battered human officer limped forward, her face streaked with ash and blood. "Sir? Take your best team and infiltrate that depot. We'll buy you as much time as we can." Ivanova's infiltration was a brutal, close-quarters affair. Her team fought room by room through the ancient facility, their advanced weaponry clashing with the fanatical devotion of the Imperial Guard. Bodies piled in corridors as alarms wailed and emergency lights bathed everything in a hellish red glow. "Almost there!" Ivanova shouted, lobbing a plasma grenade around a corner. The explosion cleared their path to the main vault, where rows of sleek obsidian warheads lay dormant. "Plant the charges," she ordered, her voice hoarse. "We don't have much time." As her dwindling squad worked feverishly to rig the warheads, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the entrance. Dracos' vanguard had arrived. Ivanova took aim at the vault's entrance, her finger tightening on the trigger. "For Earth," she whispered. The charges detonated. A blinding flash consumed the vault, the depot, and everything for kilometers around. The fireball rose into the atmosphere, visible even from orbit. Dracos watched the explosion with cold satisfaction. "So the rebels destroy their own superweapons," he mused. "No matter. Prepare the fleet for planetfall. We'll crush them the old-fashioned way." As Imperial ships descended through the smoke-choked skies, Zephyr rallied her forces for a last desperate stand. Barricades rose in the streets, snipers took up positions in shattered towers, and commandeered vehicles became mobile gun platforms. But even as the first shots were fired in this climactic battle, a battered diplomatic shuttle slipped away from the planet. Inside, Novak and a skeleton crew worked feverishly over banks of computers, parsing through the treasure trove of data Pollux had provided. "There," Novak said, his eyes gleaming. "That's our chance. It's insane, but it might just work." He opened a channel to both fleets, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "This is Ambassador Alexander Novak. To all Deltan forces, cease hostilities immediately or face the consequences of Pyro Zero's protocol." Draco sneered at the transmission. "Empty threats from a beaten foe. Press the attack!" But Novak was already in motion. Using the captured Imperial array, he sent out a pulse of code that rippled across Thalasser Prime. In hangars, storage depots, and orbital platforms, dormant Deltan drones whirred to life. The drones merged into a single, vast intelligence, more alien and powerful than anything the Deltans or humans had ever encountered. In an instant, it seized control of the Imperial fleet's central operating systems. On Dracos' bridge, screens went dark, weapons powered down, life support faltered. The Admiral's triumphant expression melted into one of abject horror as he realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. Across the battlefield, rebels and Imperials alike stood frozen in disbelief. The mighty Deltan armada hung silently in orbit, utterly paralyzed by the swarm's digital grip. In the rebel command center, Zephyr stared at the tactical display, her mind struggling to process the sudden, impossible turn of events. What just happened?" Novak's voice came through, tired but satisfied. "We've created a stalemate, Zephyr. The war is over, for now."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.